So, hello everybody, wherever you are, and welcome to the podcast. I am speaking to a wonderful young woman called Erin Lashley. She's a millennial, and we'll tell you what that is in a minute. But she's in Arizona, which is 7 hours away from where I am in London, England. So welcome, Erin, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, no problem. It's great to be here. I'm happy to connect with you and be a part of what you got going on.
Fantastic. So tell me a bit about Erin Lashley.
So Erin Lashley is 29 years old and
Wow.
have been in ministry pretty much my whole life. My grandmother was a pastor. My dad is an ordained minister. I've just been in church services every weekend for most of my lifetime. And when I was 13 years old, I did an internship at my local church and fell in love with the local church and felt like, man, this is what I want to do with my life. I loved the camaraderie. I loved creating things together with people. I loved encouraging people. And I felt like, man, if money didn't matter, this is what I would be doing. So from the age of 13 to 18, I pretty much interned at my church. And then at 18, they offered me a full-time job. And then from 18 to 26, I worked at that same church for a long time. So I did some of everything. I did, video editing I learned how to do. I did some commercials. I was in front of the camera, behind the camera. I did service management. I did event planning, all sorts of different types of stuff. And then about 3 years ago now, I moved out to Arizona. Didn't think I'd be working in a church, but got opened up another door to work in a church. And so I've just been working in church all my life and love it. But as of late, I recently shifted industry. So I'm no longer working in the local church. I still attend the church that I originally attended when I moved out here. But now I'm currently a content manager for a marketing agency out of New York, but I work remotely. And I'm loving it, learning a ton of information that I think will be very valuable to where God has me in the future and where he's taking me. But that's just a little bit about me.
Well, that's a lot about you. I mean, the first thing that struck me was that the way God aligns things, because you have worked from one church to another, and you've actually gained a lot of your experience, most of your experience and working experience in the church, but doing things that you're now doing in the secular realm. But here's the thing, because some people sometimes think going into the secular realm that they're leaving ministry and they're not in ministry. But actually, the world is our ministry, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%.
We've got to be salt everywhere, haven't we? So content management, so you're dealing with social media, I guess.
Yeah. Yes,
Fantastic.
absolutely. So I am writing copy, creating graphics, editing and making videos, and strategizing over hashtags for different clients that we have as an agency, and helping them grow their audience, build their brand so that they can build their businesses. And so it's exactly what I wanted to learn more of, because I also run a podcast myself called Millennials in Ministry, which is how we got connected. And I started that podcast because I knew I wasn't going to be working in a church forever. And I wanted something that would connect me to ministry people that I could do no matter where I go or what I do. And it's just been a blessing thus far, being able to connect with all different types of people. But as you said, I'm realizing more and more that being a millennial in ministry doesn't mean you work in a church. It just means whatever you put your hand to is ministry. So it's been a blessing.
Well, we are actually, because people sometimes get confused between the building, the four walls, and the fact that we are part of the body of Christ and therefore the church. And so we're representing the church wherever we are in those spheres of life. Now, this podcast is the reason why we got together, because I was highly impressed. I've listened to a lot of the interviews. For example, I listened to an interview you'd done with your pastor, I believe, fairly recently. And I have to say, I was a bit shocked, because he came out with, he was keeping it real. And he was saying stuff that I have never heard. I've not heard very many leaders say. And if you want to hear about that, you should listen to Erin's podcast. But so tell me about all these people you've been interviewing. Stephen Sywick, for instance.
When I would say it's a God idea, and God gave me the idea. And when he gave me the idea, it was, what I was looking for. I actually started it because I was looking for a podcast that I could listen to for training, further ministry training for millennials who wanted to be pastors or in ministry, just wanting to
Wow.
make an impact. And I could not quite find what I was looking for. There's things out there, but not like what I was looking for. So I just felt like God put it on my heart. Why don't you be that person? And the idea that I got was just interviewing other millennials out there. And some aren't millennials, but some just have lots of great things to say that millennials would need to hear. And so I just started reaching out by DMing people on Instagram or texting people that I knew or reaching out to people that I wanted to know. And most of them have said yes. I've had, out of, I would say probably close to 100 and something people I've reached out to. Most of them have said yes, and now I'm getting to a place where I'm booking out, months ahead on who I'm doing every week, because I try to do new episodes every Monday and release new episodes every Tuesday. So it's just been a blessing, having, like you said, Stephen Sywake. I know he was one of your favorite episodes. He helped produce a film called The Future of the Church, has a lot of great things to say about the future of technology, the future of what the church looks like, how we can use technology to integrate it into the church, and different thoughts you wouldn't normally think. He has a brilliant mind, and I've enjoyed meeting him and connecting with him. And then the one that you probably listen to, I believe it's Justin Kane you're thinking of, who's the pastor of Freedom Church. Yeah, he is phenomenal. He's always had a phenomenal mind when it comes to understanding the scriptures. And he runs a program called Simple Believer, which is a discipleship program where he brings people through the Bible and discipleship. And he simplifies truth in ways that I have never seen or heard anybody do that before. So he is a phenomenal man. I've known him and his wife and his family all my life, ever since I was 13. When I interned, it was with him and at the time, youth pastor. And so that's when I knew them, and I just stayed connected with them my whole life, really. And they're a great, great family to be connected with. Also interviewed a guy named Zach Wendell, he's become somebody that I really admire because he has such a creative mind. So I've been interviewing artists, ministers, people that are just doing whatever. One of the artists I interviewed, he is a spoken word artist, but he cuts hair on the side for his work. So these people do some type of everything. I've also interviewed my sister who's into dance and writing, and it teaches children in school. So there's just so many different ways to make an impact. And the more I interview people, the more I realize whatever you put your hand to is your ministry, and you can make an impact doing whatever is in your heart to do.
Totally. I'm really excited. Now, you said something earlier, and you were looking at the time for examples of people that perhaps had gone through ministry and were preparing to be ministers or pastors even. Do you feel that's your path, maybe? Because I have seen you preach.
Yeah, I definitely, if you would have asked me a year ago what I was supposed to do with my life, I would say 100%. I know that God wants me to pastor with my life. I just know it. It's just in my blood. I can feel it. I love doing it, not necessarily being on stage, but just explaining truths that I feel like God has revealed to me to someone else. I love doing that. I love encouraging people. And I really honestly believe that the way God wants me to pastor is going to look very different than what it looks like currently in the contemporary church. It's going to be different. And I think God is going to use the millennials in ministry to help me do that. And I don't know exactly what that looks like. I just know it's probably not going to be the typical pastor of a church or pastor in a church, or maybe married to a pastor necessarily. But I'm going to be pastoring in what I do. But I definitely feel called to it. I mean, my grandmother she's impacted my life more in her passing than in her living, because not only do I look just like her, but I just have a heart for community just like her, and I love the local church just like her, and it's just in me. So many people call me Glenola Lashley, which was her name, like little Glenola. I just know that it's God, and the way God made me was on purpose and intentional to what he has called me to do. So I don't know what that looks like in the future, but I do know that pastoring in some form is part of my future.
Now that's really interesting because you mentioned millennials, and as you know, I've got a real heartbeat for millennials. I mean, I do
Yeah.
all sorts of things, but that's a real focus for me. And you were
Mhm.
saying that, the way pastors and ministers operate now will
Mhm.
be very different when the millennials come. Well, they're starting to actually come up the ranks now. What do
Mhm.
you mean by that?
Yeah, I honestly think there is so much, and I pray that God helps me explain this in this time that we have together in a very clear and concise way. But I am spending so much time consuming so much content from a lot of these young millennial pastors who I admire, look up to, adore, to receive from their teaching and learn from. But I honestly believe that there's going to be a time where the world is going to change drastically, and being able to meet in four walls of a church may not be an option. And so what does the church look like when meeting in a place isn't an option? What does the church look like when lights, camera, and action and production isn't the main thing? What does it look like then? What does it look like with the advancements of technology and how we're reaching people? What does that look like? And somebody that I admire I'm trying to reach out to their group right now. Francis Chan is running a group called We Are Church, where
Yeah.
he used to pastor a large mega church. His family went to Asia for a time, came back, felt like God wanted him to do home groups,
Mm.
which is exactly what the book of Acts looks like. It was in homes. It wasn't necessarily in
Exactly.
a place.
Exactly.
And so I think that although it's becoming very popular to meet in a building, in a place, and build property and buy this building and that building, and it's impacting lives, no doubt impacting lives. I think give it 10 to 20 years and it'll drastically look different. And I think God is grooming people for that day now. And I do believe that I'm a part of that because God's giving me a vision for it.
That's so prophetic. I mean, as you know, last year we did quite a big project. We took it on ourselves, and we actually went out there and designed what we call empirical research, a survey for
Yeah.
people of your age group. It
Mhm.
was based in the UK, but actually some of the things you're saying are fairly relevant. And here's the thing, what came out of it was that 53% of the millennials interviewed felt like
Mhm.
church wasn't being that relevant. And
Mhm.
the examples that were being lived out weren't necessarily the ones that they saw in the Bible. And,
Mhm.
some of the things you're saying are aligning to that. And interestingly, you're across the Atlantic, um, over the other side,
Yeah.
basically, for me, over the other side of the world, you might as well be.
Right.
But yet, you're kind of mirroring the same things. It's really,
Mhm.
really key that we actually listen to this stuff at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love I love that. And I would love to know a little bit more about how long you've been in ministry and your heart for millennials and how all of this came to be with growthechurchnow.com.
Mm.
Tell me a little bit
Well,
about
I mean, I've had a really strange journey through Christianity. I've actually visited a lot of denominations.
that.
And
Mhm.
like you, I mean, I didn't actually return to the church from the age of 16 when I was told I had to go to Sunday school. And I
Oh,
was
wow.
actually a singer, I had a soprano voice. And so they
Okay.
wanted me in the choir. But the local assembly that I went to every single Sunday, when they saw me on the street, they ignored me.
Hmm.
And when I got to 16, I rebelled. And when my mother and father asked me why, I said, well, they're not doing what it says in the Bible. Now, isn't
Yeah.
it funny that, years later,
Yeah.
many decades later, the millennials seem to be saying the same thing. So that was my experience until I got to about 30. I was
Mhm.
married by then, and like so many people, when they're looking for a solution to maybe an issue or a challenge, they run to the
Mhm.
church. And that's what we did. And so
Yeah.
that started my journey all over again. And I served in the church almost from day one because I've
Mhm.
always liked to serve. I didn't understand the reason for it, but I was told, your gift will make a way for you. So I kept doing that.
Yeah.
But through that, I actually burnt out twice through my gift making a way for me, because everybody discovered that I could do quite a lot. And so they piled this stuff on me, and eventually I burnt out, and that was times two. But I remember on the second occasion thinking, this shouldn't really happen to other people.
Yeah.
I had by then forged a career in HR, and my specialism is training and organizational development. And so this is where my specialisms come from.
That's awesome.
About 6 years ago, I got very strong leading, and I met two people who I have never seen since. And they both said to me, this is what you've been called to do. And they actually talked about beautifying the bride. And when I heard that message myself, I had to ask, what does this mean? And that was probably the beginning of Grow the Church Now. It's there to raise the hands of leaders. It's there to help the church and get it more effective and more efficient. And it's been a challenge because some of the things that we're saying are not necessarily the things that are being said in a wider context. So it's but the reason why we did this research was exactly that reason, because we've not just got to be talking about the assemblies that gather every Sunday in a nice building. We've got to talk about what happens when the leaders of those assemblies get old enough not to be able to do it anymore. Who do they pass the baton on to? And that's my heart for millennials.
That's great. And I think it's very real, because especially one thing that I've seen consistently in church is the struggle of a senior leader passing on the baton to someone else, and the things that you go through when you pass it on, because it is a part of who you are, and trusting that person, and kind of getting over your own insecurities and your own ego to then give it to someone else, knowing that the way that they're going to do it is going to be way different than how you did it, and working through all of that, and that's why I think it's so interesting when you look at ministry not as a church and a place to go to, but you look at it as whatever your hand finds to do. Then it's not so much about I have to create something to then give it to someone so that they can keep it the way it was created. But it's like a dispersed church, just like the early church. You just go out and minister the way that God's made you to minister and win people to Jesus,
It's interesting because I'm looking at you, beautiful young woman, and the fact is there's a gender, or there might be a gender issue. Have you actually experienced that at all?
I've never heard of a senior leader giving a church over to a young woman. Like I've never heard of that, but it could very well be. Although I'm a huge proponent of, even within churches, having team leaders, having team leads being two people, because I've always seen it be a lot for one person to carry. Even if it's a choir director, he has an assistant, or if it's a vocal director, it's two people. It's just always worked better when there's two. And I think it even works even better when it's a guy and a girl, because of the two gender perspectives and how you're able to multiply your impact because you understand two different worlds. And I think that a lot of ministries, even within a church, do really well when a husband and wife can work together, or even if they're not husband and wife, if some type of guy and girl can work together on something, it just multiplies its effectiveness.
Balance,
absolutely. So it can be tough when you're single and working closely with another guy as a single woman, because there's just so many boundaries there, and you just have to be very careful with that. But I think it's a beautiful thing when a couple can do it together, because it's just a lot safer as far as ministering to people together and all of that type of stuff. But, who's to say I won't be the first, I don't really truthfully desire taking over a church, but a church building and all of that, because I know that it's a lot of financial responsibility, a lot of stress and thinking about salaries and property and expansion and all of that. And at this point in my life, I'd rather go without all of that and stick to the people and focus on the people part. But who's to say what the Lord will do, you know?
Exactly. Now, I want to ask you, you know, because we have only got a few minutes, but I want to ask you, what are the key challenges facing millennial Christians in the context of the church, the kingdom at the moment? And how can leaders, two-part question, and how can leaders help millennials through that, do you feel?
Yeah, I think a lot of millennials have their own way of thinking. I think in the sense of we've been watching for a while now. We're old enough to see how our parents and people that have gone before us have done things and what's worked and what hasn't worked for them. And I think that we are establishing who we are and who we want to be. And I think with that in mind, you know, it's hard for some church leaders to see where we're coming from. I really genuinely believe that if you can attach yourself to the heart of a millennial, meaning forget your numbers, forget your attendance charts, forget the goals you're trying to reach, although I do understand and agree with it. You can't measure, you can't manage anything you don't measure. And I understand that that's necessary and important inside the church world as far as managing an organization. But if you can set aside the numbers aspect and the administrative responsibilities and just see the person and stop looking at the person as a goal. Like if I can win this person and they become radically on fire for God, then they can be the leader of this next ministry I want to start, and stop thinking that way and just saying, man, I just want them to love Jesus with all their heart, and I want them to go out into the world and make a huge impact for God, whether it's with me or without me. I just want to be a part of their story and their journey because God has blessed me to be a part of their life. I think you'll win so much more, astronomically more in the long run if you think and approach leading millennials that way, because I do believe millennials can sniff out people who are not genuine and people who have a secondary agenda and people who are not really interested in them, but they're interested in what they can do for their agenda and their platform and their church. And, you know, in a way, especially here in America, we're kind of taught to think that way when it comes to, I have a business and I have a goal and who can help me accomplish my goal. But the church doesn't think that way. The church is about reaching people. It's about reaching people for the gospel. And the gospel isn't about us. It's about Jesus and what he's wanting to accomplish.
Absolutely. But what you're talking about is a complete paradigm shift. It will take a shift in thinking in a lot of contexts. And that's what Pastor Justin was talking about. Exactly. And I just got really excited when I heard it. And whoever's listening now, you've got to go to Erin's podcast, which we'll give you the details for in a moment, and listen to that particular interview. It was absolutely brilliant. I'm definitely going to listen to it again. I mean, I'm actually studying.
So glad that you enjoyed it.
Go on.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it and that it impacted you. I mean,
it did.
It blessed me. I've listened to it several times myself, and it has definitely changed the way I approach Christianity. I'm telling you that right now for sure.
It was that powerful. It really was. I just am so delighted. We're going to have to do this again because I don't feel half an hour is enough time for us to get all the stuff out. And as things go on and as we both develop in our ministries, I was saying just now that I'm actually doing a course, a university course in theology. And again, it's just opened my mind to so many things, and the way that I'm going to be running ministry, the way I'm going to be working with other people, with ministers and pastors. I'm actually working with people in America at the moment, and will continue to do that. So I am so excited for you as well, and what God is going to do for you. I really thank you for your time. So tell us where we can listen to this podcast and how people can keep in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to erinvlashley.com and everything that I'm doing is there. So erinblashley.com/podcast is where you'll find all the archives to podcasts I've done. And the podcast is available everywhere that you can subscribe, whether it's Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Chromecast, any place, any of that, it's available everywhere. But the links for all the ones I've done and also a calendar of ones I'm planning to do in the future are there as well. Yeah, so I mean, I'm reachable on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter. I'm primarily more so on Instagram and Facebook more than any of the other platforms, but all of my handles are Erin B. Lashley, just like my website. So you can find me anywhere online.
Now, is that a B or a V? So it's B for brother.
It's a V for Victoria. So Erin.
So, okay.
Lashley.
Okay, so spell it all out for us.
Yeah.
So it's E.
So it's ERIN V
Yeah.
for Victoria, LASHLEY.com.
Fantastic. Yeah, so fantastic website, everyone. So Erin, I want to thank you so much, and I know you're all glammed up because you've got somewhere to go. Yeah. So I'll let you go off to your event. But again, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so
welcome. We'll speak very soon.
Absolutely.
Bless you.
Thank you, Madge. This has been a blessing. Thank you.
Wonderful. Take care. Bye.